February 6th, Metro Water Services Stormwater Management Commission to order. I think we have a quorum. It's definitely starting to feel like spring out there. You know, woke up, just decided not to go for a run because I felt like it's too hot. So, yeah, that was my excuse anyway, you know. But with that, as always, our first item of business is to review the meeting minutes and decision letters. There were no decision letters from last case. We only had a preliminary. So I know Logan had emailed out the meeting minutes to the commissioners, and I will entertain a motion when anyone is ready.
And Rebecca might be able to pull those up too on the screen, because I may have emailed them fairly late.
Yeah, we're without tablets today. What about screens? Do our screens work today? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in the for meeting folder.
I think we have a short agenda today, so we'll try to get out of here in record time, if also by giving due process. It's nice to have one case on the agenda now and then.
I'd make a motion to approve the January meeting minutes as presented.
Great, we have a motion from Ms. Simpson. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Fulmer. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. All right.
Can you note, just, I wasn't here, so I need to abstain from voting.
That's right. Thank you, Nathan. Mr. Oliver abstained. And, okay. All right. Logan, I don't have an agenda, but I think there's no other business for the first item or the first case.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so if the applicant could come to the front here, and while you're doing that, I'll let Logan introduce the case.
Opening statement to the applicant. If you are not satisfied with a decision made by the Stormwater Management Commission, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the Commission's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied. Case number 1 on the agenda is case 2024-00034, 3407 Springbrook Drive, appeal at 3407 Springbrook Drive. APN is 118-1000-6400. Inspector is Development Services. Council District 25, Jeff Prepteet. Applicant's request. Appeal staff's interpretation of what constitutes footprint in Metro Code, Section 1564-170. Appellant is Justin Van Dam, represented by Justin Van Dam. Comments, Stormwater staff. Comments to be presented by MWS staff. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, no comment provided. Greenways is not requesting a greenway or greenway easement.
Okay, so I'll give you a kind of a brief of the process. You'll have 10 minutes to present your case. I won't count the introductions. And after your 10 minutes is up, I'll give you a 2-minute warning. And we'll close the presentation and we'll open it up for any public comment. And if there's anybody here to speak in favor or against, I'll give them 2 minutes to speak at the podium. And then we'll review any letters that we've received or emails, and we'll close the public hearing. And then after that, the commission will discuss, and we may have some questions back and forth for you. All right, so with that. Thank you for asking. That there's a little round button to the side of the mic, and if it's red, that means your mic is on. If you'd keep that pressed while you're
That one right
speaking,
there?
that'd be good. Yep. Awesome. All right. With that, I'll turn it over to you, and look forward to hearing your case.
You ready? Well, good morning. I'm Justin Van Dam at 3407 Springbrook Drive. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. I'd like to start this morning just by letting everybody know, actually, I'd like to start, I believe I'm allowed 2 minutes of rebuttal and 8 minutes for the presentation instead, so I'd like to invoke that if I could, please.
That's fine.
Okay. But I'd like to start the presentation this morning. I have no intent of impacting the floodway. There is no intention here to harm or damage my neighbors or do anything like that. I grew up in Franklin. I've lived here a very long time. I was here for the 2010 flood. In fact, when I was stationed at Fort Campbell, I actually lived in Nashville and commuted an hour each way to Clarksville. So the city's very near and dear to me. I have no intention of harming my neighbors. This is not what I'm here to do today. I also didn't build this to come here and ask for your forgiveness without, a permit or anything like that. What I am trying to do is use the available footprint of the home to do a compliant addition using the existing deck and patio, which I believe does qualify as footprint for a variety of reasons. We'll go over the definition of footprint, the available public records that show the footprint of the home, as well as how insurance would view this in the event of a total loss, and then also how MWS considers this space in certain circumstances. Next slide, please. So footprint is not expressly defined in the SWMC or the Stormwater Management Manuals. There is no definition defined in those, but the most basic level, this is the area that is covered by something, with the impression of a foot on the surface not being very helpful for us today. If you can go to the next slide, though, the only actual available public records that demonstrate the footprint is the real property search of the Davidson County Property Assessor's Office, which is what you're looking at here on the slides. So this building sketch clearly shows that the deck and patio are a part of the home, just as if the garage or the total living space is represented there as well. There's no other search results or opportunity to evaluate footprint that's been provided or that is available. I'd also like you to take kind of special attention here that the deck and patio is adjoined to the structure by exterior rigid walls, which will be important here on the next slide. If you can go to that slide for me. So part of the reason we believe this is footprint is a part of the FEMA regulations. When they look at this, this part of the structure, the deck and patio, is adjoined by that rigid exterior wall, which according to the regulation that's on your screen there, in the event of a total loss, that area of the structure would be covered. So what this means, to me at least, I think, is if a flood came tomorrow and washed away the entire structure and everything was gone, that part of the structure would be replaced and or compensated for in the event of that total loss. Thank you. She's ahead of me. I believe the reason for that is this is an impervious surface. This deck and patio is not pervious. It's part of the ISR fee that is paid, and it is also below the base flood elevation. So what I think will make my neighbors happy in this case is elevating this structure above the base flood elevation with a compliant addition would actually allow some water with venting and other mitigations to flow through this surface, whereas as it is today, it is further harming the floodway. Additionally, in the patio expansion that we've discussed here, if this is not part of the footprint, I asked MWS, okay, so I can expand this structure because it's not part of the footprint, which they said that does not allow new structures. Now, this is a little contradictory, but it also kind of pokes a little bit of a hole in the argument that codes provided. If you can go to the next slide, please, which is that footprint is only part of the covered area. This seems a little dubious to me because the covered area, the staff would not treat it any differently if I went and constructed this structure and put it in the floodway. You'd fine me, you'd levy a fine against me and demand that this area be removed, regardless of if this area was covered or not covered. Also missing here is kind of any interpretation from codes that I'm further harming the floodway, which I don't think I am. Conversely, the definition of footprint that we discussed is the only available one that I know of, and any public records that you can find if you search for this property demonstrates that this area is part of the footprint. FEMA would cover this as part of the total loss of the structure in and of itself, as well as this being an impervious surface that I could elevate above the base flood elevation and improve any sort of flood risk. Lastly, this consideration is partly because the MWS considers this area as impervious surface that would be treated as such. So whether I built this property or I built this addition or the existing deck there, there's really no impact to the floodway. Yield my remaining time.
All right, you've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think I'm all right for now. Just
Okay.
the 2 minutes left for rebuttal.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, I'll close the applicant's presentation and open up for public comment. Is there anybody here to speak in favor or against? Okay. Logan, do we receive any letters, emails?
There is a letter of opposition that I have printed out. Everybody should have a copy of that they could read.
Okay.
That's all I received.
All right, it's from Mrs. Montgomery, teacher from my high school alma mater, MLK, great school. Okay, all right, anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll close public hearing and open up for public comment. I did want to make one opening question for Ms. Terrellad. In this case, definitions, this is an interpretation of a definition. I'm assuming that the applicant had come to staff and there was a disagreement over the definition of footprint. Was legal involved in that conversation? And can you give us some background?
Yes, we were involved, and we did have multiple conversations with the applicant and with staff, and consulted with the zoning administrator, and just sort of looked at the applicable resources that we had within the Metro Code. The only thing I'll note that the FEMA reg part that he did bring up, I addressed that in my email to him. I think, and I pulled up my emails so I could recall what I said, but so if there's a claim, FEMA said that they would cover it, and that's a language that was provided to us. To me, that doesn't help with defining footprint, because just because an insurance policy would cover what's highlighted doesn't mean that they actually considered it to be the footprint, because the point is more obvious, because in the same category, number 3, if you looked at the list, they list a detached garage as something that they would cover also in the event of a total loss, which just goes to show that they're not looking at it from a footprint perspective, if you follow me there. So yeah, we looked at it, we looked at the applicable definitions, and I think that the pervious pavers, while they may touch the porch as it steps down, I don't think there was a really good picture. I think a picture would probably really be more helpful in this case. And Rebecca, if you could pull that up so we could see what we're sort of going back and forth over. We just don't believe that should be included in the definition of footprint. Now, you do have a staff report, and you have, sort of our justification there as well for you to look at. But at the end of the day, the regs do not give a definition of footprint. So for purposes of what you're doing here today, you're going to just decide if you think that section 15 that we always look at says you cannot enlarge the footprint of your house. If this is footprint, then he can, come back, and he's still going to have to ask for a variance. If it's not footprint and you decide today it's not footprint, then you would be upholding staff's previous decision, and that would be, your decision on this appeal.
Okay, thank you. And then I know Mr. Lindsay had created a document for us. I'd like to recognize him. Just thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chairman and commissioners, the stormwater staff has felt like since the very, very beginning of this that it was a pretty cut and dried situation. From our comments, it has been our practice dating back to post-2010 flood time to consider when it is appropriate to allow repair, maintenance, or even adding additional space to a building located in the floodplain or floodway of a modeled and mapped stream or river in the metro area. At the request of the City Council, we assisted various council members in crafting the ordinance now identified as Metropolitan Code 1564.170. The intent was to protect for loss of property and, more importantly, for loss of life. And the reality is that city council members came to us and said, why are we even building something in the floodway of a river? And that's what kind of led to the development of what became that code, that whole 170 section. The purpose of the Metro Code is to provide detail for the handling of proposed projects within the floodways in the metro area. Beginning in paragraph A, there is a direct clause that states simply, the first sentence in the entire citation is, no new structures shall be constructed within the floodway. And beyond that, there are a series of provisions that allow some maintenance, repairs. We didn't want to be in a situation where somebody needed a roof replacement, for example, that may trigger a substantial improvement or substantial damage kind of a situation and cause them to have to not be able to replace a roof that was leaking, for example. Beyond that, there some new construction is recognition that FEMA would allow you to rebuild a damaged structure if you were substantially damaged. We're not aware, but it seems that all of these scenarios are prefaced by the occurrence of a casualty loss. And we are not aware of any casualty loss during Mr. Van Dam's time of ownership. It's within this paragraph A that we find the language, no such existing structure located in the floodway shall be enlarged or expanded beyond its existing height or building footprint. In our regulations in Appendix B, we find a definition for structure with the words, for floodplain management purposes, a walled and roofed building. And the full definition of that section is on the following page of your handout. While we have not provided a definition for every word in our regulations, our appendices, and ordinances, we're quite comfortable in interpreting the word footprint as the outer dimensions of an existing building or structure is defined by the area that is walled and roofed and containing what we would consider to be habitable space, living space, a bedroom, a kitchen, a living room. We do not consider the deck and patio to be part of the footprint of this residential property. In the case of Mr. Van Dam's neighborhood, Battlefield Estates, Metro Water Stormwater acquired approximately 26 homes for demolition, beginning 4 houses down from Mr. Van Dam. These homes had experienced multiple flood events over a period of years, including some as high as rooftop levels. This area is one of the most complex drainage basins in Metro, and the two creeks come together, the West Fork of Browns Creek, which kind of serves the whole Oak Hill area, and the Middle Fork of Browns Creek, and they have to pass through a 3,000-foot long culvert under both Interstate 440 and Interstate 65, exiting across the interstate from the McDonald's in the Berry Hill area, close to the Goodwill Center on the east side of the interstate. It's an area of considerable flood risk due to the complexity of the drainage basins and the the tendency of water to pool and back up beginning at the entrance to the culvert system. While we're not certain exactly what Mr. Van Dam's intentions are with this property, we feel that we have been very consistent in our permitting for construction in floodplains and floodways in the metro area, and will diligently continue to do so. So, if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to.
Can we turn on the 2010 flood imagery, Rebecca? This house was not impacted?
The only thing I would say is the appeal before us, in my opinion, I don't even know if that would be applicable, because I think what we're looking at now is the language of the statute itself. If we find that the applicant's, his interpretation is the right one, then we would come back and be talking about the variance. So that's the only thing I would say, but
I guess where I'm headed with that is, if, Metro and flood buyback properties, if the applicant is unable to develop this property in the manner in which he wanted to, and there were other homes that were in his neighborhood that were purchased by Metro due to it being in the floodway and flooded, then, as part of a concessions to where we land here would be an opportunity to have this home bought back by Metro as part of a flood buyback.
I don't think that's before us. That's the only thing I would say, but.
I understand it's not, but it's if on the tax record that I saw the area that was calculated by Metro Properties, the area that was considered was taxable, I believe, was also counting the deck and the patio, but I'd like maybe some clarification on that. But first, let's go back to the flood imagery. Rebecca, is this the flood imagery?
It is the flood imagery, but the flood imagery doesn't always necessarily show areas that were still inundated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
Right now, we're talking about definition of footprint, but everything has a footprint. That's a perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell you to outline the footprint of the sidewalk, you could do it. I mean, but it's a building footprint is the critical thing. And is this a structure? I think I found the right pictures on Zillow. I mean, it's wood posts, so it's not attached to the house. It's just adjacent to it. And if it is a wood post, that's a structure. And you're asking to enlarge a structure, which is prohibited. So, I mean, I know the case is a definition of footprint, but you can't write regs that address every situation. It's more than, the intent is clearly to not build new buildings in the floodway unless they qualify for one of the exemptions.
From a stormwater standpoint, if it's considered impervious
Well, that's detention.
and it's a structure,
So,
Yeah, but
and if you're not expanding beyond that footprint,
yeah, well, you are. I mean, it's vertically you are.
but that's the gray area that we're talking about is, okay, if it's a
It's
patio and
pretty-
it's structured and it's impervious.
No such existing structure located in the floodway shall be enlarged or expanded beyond its existing height or building footprint. And so the patio I see is very small, and so you're asking to do that plus hardscape on the ground, or I'm not sure what the footprint is you're asking to enlarge, but to me, you can't go vertical. I mean, it has a railing, it has a deck, but, I mean, I think that I respect the research you did and the legal interpretation of it, but it kind of goes back to the intent. And I mean, I battled this in zoning codes all over the nation, and it's, you can find a loophole, but it doesn't mean the loophole gets you where you want to be.
and I did some research ahead of the meeting, kind of I looked at Tennessee case law, I looked at a couple of different things. There wasn't anything I saw in Tennessee case law on it, and so, but really we're going back and looking at the manual. And I do want to say, Mr. Van Dam, that was a great presentation. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put in on this, but when I am looking at 1564-170, I think that there are actually two grounds that MWS could have denied. And the first one is the fact that, I think it's the first part, no new structure shall be constructed within the floodway. The second part where you're talking about building footprint, I agree. I think with MWS's interpretation, there would need to be a casualty loss. At this point, that wasn't really presented, but even if you go further, I appreciate that you were looking at the word footprint, but I think building has to be included as well. And so when I'm reading it, I'm looking at a building footprint. And then that's when I think that we do have more direction in the manual definitions, the MWS manual definitions of building. As a part of that, it says even for floodplain management purposes. So if you go to the definition of building, it's any structure built for support, shelter, or enclosure for any occupancy or storage. And then we're talking about floodplain management purposes, which is where I think this would fall under. It tells you to also see structures. And then it goes on to say for floodplain management purposes, a walled and roofed building. So my interpretation of that is we're looking at a building footprint. You're looking at the exterior walls and roofed-in building as to what would define that building footprint, which would exclude the patio and deck. But that's the way that I kind of walked through the statute, or I guess the code, and kind of came to my conclusion.
And a structure would be considered to be a deck. A deck would be considered to be a structure, but it would not be a building. And a patio is not a building, so.
Yeah. I have to admit, I made a mistake. I didn't close public hearing, and I didn't allow the applicant to have his rebuttal of the time he reserved from his presentation. So I want to honor that for you.
I honestly wasn't sure when that was going to occur. So
I'm sorry.
I'm not
That's
offended.
why I admitted my mistake.
So I was trying not to step on anybody there, but I made a few notes, and so I hope I'm not overstepping by addressing some of the comments that have been made. I'll start with staff's response here, where they call out that that we're defining structure as both habitable space and a walled and roofed building. Yet when I asked, can I expand the deck, they said there's no new structures allowed. So you're treating it as a structure when I'm asking to expand the deck, but you're not treating it as a structure when I'm trying to expand it as part of the footprint of the home. It's a little inconsistent there. As well as this habitable space, I think we'd all consider that attached garage part of the building footprint that is in direct contact with the home, has a door that goes out there, but we wouldn't consider that habitable space. So I think it's a little inconsistent there in how the statute's being treated as far as just being used only to deny these requests. Again, I want to take in mind too that this isn't a request to impact the floodplain. Like there's still ability here. I could come in a foot. I'm not trying to add additional, Mr. Fulmer, I'm not trying to add beyond the outprint or the outline of the patio to have any more impervious surface added. So there's mitigations we could do. I'll come in a foot. You know, there's options here, as well as going up. But I did want to address that, as well as you're asking about the 2010 flood. I didn't own the home in 2010, but as far as I can tell from the pictures of the flood, as well as what my neighbors have told me in the permits, some utilities were damaged, but it was some water in the crawl space kind of situation. It was not something that took the whole property off the map, as may have happened kind of further into that park there.
It obviously was more severe further down the creek, but there was a building permit pulled in the weeks following the 2010 flood for the replacement of the HVAC system. So that probably goes to the water in the crawl space, damage to the air conditioning and ductwork system under the house. So. But also the concept of habitable space is not part of the definition that we've read. The garage obviously is not a habitable, what you would generally consider habitable, but it's part of the main house. It's part of the house. It has walls, it has a roof with the rest of the house, so I don't think that's a germane argument as well. The addition of additional rooms or what have you, well, you can argue that that's an expansion of a structure, and the deck would be an expansion of a structure. Those are not the same because the house is specifically excluded. It's prohibited.
But the reason that,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but the reason that it's even a question is because it's a deck and not a patio. Is that correct?
I assume you're asking me, sorry, it's both. So the deck and patio are both adjoining to the house. The deck is a little elevated just because of how the finished floor height, you have a door that walks out and then you step down to the patio. So if the picture went, there you go. Yeah. So the deck is elevated like that. Man, that looks a lot better than it does now. But then you step down to that impervious patio surface. And sorry, I just wanted to make sure I covered the notes I had for the rebuttal here as far as the insurance claim. I do remember when legal mentioned the detached garage. I do want to bring up just that as part of the regulation that's listed here, and I have a copy if anyone's interested. The detached garage is listed because they treat it a little differently for an insurance purpose. So I don't think it's really relevant in this case where they're talking about a total loss of the existing structure. The detached garage portion is talking about your limit of liability and how you can insure that a little bit differently. So, well, I understand legal's trying to do their job. I just want to say that that's why I didn't consider that as part of the presentation.
But right. I think the really important thing to consider is whether we're trying to It seems to me we're trying to decide whether a deck and a patio count as a building footprint. And I think it's really hard for us to say that that does meet a building footprint because that would apply to so many things. As Mr. Fulmer said, you could say that the sidewalk and the front patio of the house would then be part of the building footprint because it's the very same condition and just maybe connected to the house in a different way or a smaller way. So, I mean, I think it is quite clear that it says expands beyond the existing height or building footprint, and I think it's really difficult to say that a deck and a patio are part of a building footprint.
Well, they're structurally independent. And if you take the sidewalk out front, if that's part of the building and defined footprint, well, you got other rules that say you can't put a house on top of that sidewalk. I mean, so we could agree with you on the footprint, but I can't agree with you that you enclose it, you're changing it vertically. And that definition that you showed said attached and, I forget what it was, but I mean, this abuts it. Those bricks aren't screwed to the house.
They do form the foundation of the crawl space. And then as well as when you're defining footprint, I understand, the driveway is not part of the footprint of the home, but if you go to the assessor's office, that's our only available public record to say what is the footprint of the home. And it's very clearly on the building sketch as well as the square footage etched out. And it does kind of form, you couldn't remove the bricks right up against the house and still say you have the patio really, because it's making that crawl space area that's under the deck. You can't really see it there, but, and then the deck is attached to the house. So if it wouldn't stand without the house.
Of course, one of the things that's not been discussed as part of this whole issue, this is a non-compliant structure. By my rough calculations yesterday, looking at the existing elevation certificate that was dated 2003, and comparing it against the flood maps that were released this year in June of 2024, this house is close to 5 feet below this regulatory requirement. If you were in a place where you could consider an addition to a house, there would be any number there would be any number of discussions held relative to how high this structure, an addition would have to be built. But right now, it's the main living level of the house is 5 feet below. If you came in with a new site in the floodplain and said, I want to build a new house, this house is 5 feet lower than what we would otherwise require for that same structure to meet the 4 foot above freeboard requirements. So.
Yeah, but I think what Mr. Lindsay's saying is you got about between 2 and 4 variance requests. If we agree with you on footprint, you got a lot of other problems that I don't think you're going to be able to get over because you're disturbing a buffer. Well, it's not even the buffer. You're in the floodway. You're disturbing that. You got mitigation. You've got finished floor elevations. You got a lot of hurdles. And so if we agree with you today, I still don't see how your goal is going to be met at the end of the day.
So one of my concerns here is we're being asked to interpret a definition for a single structure and case, but we are bound by, thinking about hardships for some of these requests. And for us to interpret a definition that could be used over and over to try to circumvent the process is very concerning to me. I'm also concerned that you're saying, this is what I want to do. I'm going to, elevate and do these things and do mitigation, but we have no actual plans in front of us. And I don't think interpreting a definition is part of our purview necessarily as a variance request. I would much rather have seen pre and post plans presented, and then we discuss what the impacts are comparatively for the proposed development or addition compared to the existing situation. Then we have actual tangibles based on footprints that are changed in those things or square footage. of pervious or impervious area that we could make a decision on. My concern is that, asking for us to define the footprint is kind of circumventing and trying to sidestep the actual process that we typically follow, and could put us in a really challenging situation with future cases.
Well, and I can speak to that, and our counsel can correct me if I'm wrong. So there are two different types of things that can come to us, an appeal and a variance request. He's bringing an appeal because he cannot bring a variance request without the interpretation of this particular code. And so he's in one of those situations without, obviously, MWS disagrees with his interpretation, and that basically cuts off the variance request. So his only means of actually getting a variance request is for us to make. And that's a part, we are like a quasi judicial body. And so we do have the authority to make interpretations under these statutes. So I completely hear what you're saying. Like, I understand because it is kind of tough, but that would be the second step. If we were to agree with his interpretation, to come back with the full plans and everything else, which I think he's heard, would be a tough, depending on what is presented, would be a tough battle as it is. But it's one of those, I think we've had a couple of cases where people are in limbo until we make some sort of actual decision on the interpretation.
Can we put back up what the actual request is? Because reverting back to that, and I think, I just want to put out my sort of a forewarning. I don't know how you're going to, even if we agreed on this and you move, and you're able to move.
No, I understand. And she's absolutely correct. But until you clear this hurdle, that there's no developer that wants to take your money, because it'll hurt their reputation if they took a bunch of your money and then you don't get past this hurdle. There's about 6.5 feet above the home that is attic space. So you think about elevating, as Roger mentioned, if the elevation certificate, the current finished floor height is about 490 feet. I think the base flood elevation is 492, so I have to elevate to 496, 496. So there's still some space there if you think about the roof of the building, that's attic space to make some options. But again, that's second step after determining that it can be done.
Go ahead.
No, I think that I do appreciate the thoroughness and thoughtfulness behind this, but I just kind of want to reiterate, I think that the intent of what a building is fairly clear, and not to compound this or open a window to a different definition, but we're dealing with an impervious material patio, pervious. And so it's the bricks. One could argue, anyways, the materials. I just think furthermore, but take that all aside, the material, it is, the intent was a structure. I don't know, to me, this is fairly black and white, but that's just my opinion.
Appeal of interpretation, but what is I'm confused on, if you had to write what we're voting on.
I think when I read this, I think the appeal, my understanding of MWS's interpretation is it was twofold. They denied it in part because it says no new structure shall be constructed within the floodway. So that's where you stop. And then it goes on and says, notwithstanding the foregoing. So if you fell into the secondary, there could be some potential options, but that would only happen in the event of a casualty loss not exceeding 50% of the appraised value of improvement on the property. So my understanding from what MWS presented was, in their mind, there was no new structure. The definition of structure under this the management manual definition for floodplain management purposes, structure is a walled and roof building. And that is what appears was being proposed. So I think that was their first potential denial of this request. And then the appellate was looking at the second half that I don't know is even applicable, but if we were to look at it, he was asking about the interpretation of footprint, which I think that he did a very thorough presentation on footprint, but I think what you have to look at is building footprint. And I think Metro found that what he was requesting was not, that is not a building footprint. So I would say, and I am happy to make a motion because there can be further discussion after a motion, but I would move to deny the applicant's appeal of MWS's interpretation of 1564-170, not just the word footprint, but their entire interpretation of that one code.
But this was part of my question earlier. It's to just.
We have a motion. Let's see if we have a second first, if that's okay. And then we can discuss, and if it doesn't go through, then we can, just follow it. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and seconded, then we got some discussion.
So I kind of just want to be clear on the request before us is to interpret the word building footprint. And so, and just to be clear, we are being asked if a deck and a patio is a part of a building footprint. And that's what we're being asked to interpret and vote on. I just think it's important to have that clarity in the record because if we're coming before it saying, can you tell us what a building footprint is? I think it's really clear that we're being asked, is it a deck and a patio?
I mean, if you boil it down, yes, but, you know, if you want to take it that far, you can take it that far, but at the end of the day, does what he's trying, it does footprint sort of meet what he has here, right?
Yeah, and so that's kind of there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between Metro codes and Metro Water Services. Metro code says the building, the walls of the building essentially is a building footprint. Actually, there's three disconnects. There's three. All right, number one is Metro codes. Number two is tax assessor's office defining the footprint of the building on the appraisal website that we saw. And number three is Metro Water Services, including the footprint of patios, paved impervious surfaces as part of footprint as it relates to water.
We would take it.
Well, hold on, I have a motion on the floor. If my motion dies, but is anyone?
This is part of that discussion.
Well, did we get a second?
Yes.
Is that right? Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed that, Fiona.
It's okay.
Okay, my bad.
It's okay. Yes, sir.
I just, the whole issue of measuring impervious surface for the purpose of charging a stormwater user fee is totally not a part of this question about footprint, because the stormwater user fee is based on the measurable impervious surface on a parcel, and that includes the roof of the house, the sidewalk to the front door, the deck on the backyard, the patio attached to the deck, the driveway into the house, and if you had a dog house out in the middle of the backyard, we would measure and include that as well. So that has nothing to do with a question about footprint relative to the appropriateness of adding on to a structure in a floodway.
It's not
I just want to make that clear.
Disconnect that they're not coordinated, is that the applicability of the definition is different in each case. He's not paying taxes on his wood deck like he is his kitchen. You know, I mean, yes, they outline it, but it's all different. And to your point, it doesn't matter if it's a patio, a sidewalk, or a roof. Stormwater doesn't know. It falls on a hard surface.
Right,
So
and that's consistent with what they do with every parcel. They include the outline of the house and the pertinent structures. They don't work for me, and I don't work for them, and they don't have anything to do with the definition of the requirements for construction of anything in the floodplain or floodway.
And if this were a second or third story cantilever patio off a multifamily building, well, that's structurally integral to the building. I mean, this is on the ground floor and supported structurally by the ground and supported by posts. I mean, they're independent. You could remove that deck without hurting that house.
Unless the deck was tied into the house,
I just want to be clear in our discussion that if another similar case comes, everyone is going to be reviewed differently. We'll likely land in the same spot, but that no future case can use this determination, for a blanket catch-all.
And that's what this discussion's about, because we've got every department's got its own definition, it seems, of what this is. And if this deck had walls and a roof, and it was screened in, and it was unconditioned like the garage might be, is the garage conditioned?
Only by it being in contact with a very small house with an oversized AC unit, but no, it is not.
So I guess my question to Mr. Lindsay would be, if the deck was enclosed, would that be part of the building footprint?
It could be. I mean, if it met, again, we didn't set out to create a finely defined definition of what a footprint is. We could certainly do that and may do that in the next 30 days. But if it had walls and a roof and was part of the structure attached to the building, then maybe that you could make a case for doing that. In the case of this, it's in the floodway, so that's just not permissible.
So one thing I would say is, while there may be other interpretations, we are looking at Metro Stormwater Management Manual definitions, and there is a definition for building. And so we know what building means, and so we're using that next to footprint, right? So building is clear, it's any structure built for support, shelter, or enclosure, or any occupancy or storage. And then it goes on to say for floodplain management purposes, see also structure, which then says for floodplain management purposes, a walled and roofed building. So my interpretation would be like building means a walled and roof building footprint. And so we don't have to look outside of the stormwater manual, where if we had no guidance at all, I could see how we would be looking at maybe other regulations and how it may be applied with other, metro agencies, but I don't think we have to go there for this particular one because we do have some guidance.
And I do think, although confusing, again, it comes back to this is applicable to how stormwater, the intent of why, and how staff has ruled in the past. I mean, we have to consider that as well, not necessarily how codes defines or in addition to what Commissioner Simpson said.
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to remind everybody that it was a codes interpretation that denied this in the first place. So they're using codes to make the denial, and now we're saying that what code says is irrelevant. So I just want to say that that's a little inconsistent, as well as, the actual space here and the definition of footprint. There's only one place to go to look for that. So if you're going to buy the house and you're doing your due diligence to say, can I expand on this house, where else are you supposed to go to determine that this can't be used?
But you're asking, but the staff already said it doesn't count as a footprint, so you came to us and say, does it?
Codes.
Does it? Okay, but you're here today to say, does this count as a part of the footprint in terms of the stormwater regulations? And I think what we're saying is a deck and a patio doesn't count as part of a building footprint.
No, I understand the discussion. I'm just saying we were trying to separate codes from it, whereas the determination from legal was Metro Codes interprets it this way.
Well, and I think that the intent is when you do go forward with projects like this, multiple departments weigh in on it, and they have different things that obviously they're looking at. And in this case, it is from the stormwater purview, even though it might have started at codes.
Codes is where stormwater went for determination. So.
And we're discussing.
Right. I was just trying to clear that up.
No, thank you.
I was just going to say that the appeal before you is the stormwater staff's decision. Did we look at other resources? Of course, we looked at other resources. That's sort of what we're supposed to do. We did speak to codes. We did speak to other departments, but at the end of the day, the staff made this decision, and you are reviewing his appeal is what the staff's decision was.
Yeah, and I was providing some color on the other side of the coin for everybody to consider, and also for staff to consider, because part of this is, I'm going to use the word consumer protection. So if someone wants to go and find out what the footprint of his property is of the building, and he goes to the tax site to determine that, I think there needs to be some consistency amongst the departments to help clarify some of this, just like we have done so in the past on water-dependent structures and many of the things that have become before our commission. So these type of cases provide a great example to kind of further refine, and it's hard to target every little detail, but these are great opportunities to, I guess, improve some of our, I'll just say, definitions. And there's gray area in those definitions for a reason, and that's our purview here to help drive those to a certain definition. But I think this is a great case. I think the applicant's done an excellent job of providing some research and a great presentation to prove his case of the interpretation. It's just, we have, I think, consistency is one of our, we've got to be consistent in the way we rule so that we cover our basis for prior and future cases. And so I think this one is going to be a good example of how we can improve future applicants that come towards this commission with a similar case. So with that, we've got a motion, we've got a second, we've had some very healthy discussion. Mr. Lewis, anything else you'd like to add? Sorry? Okay, all right. With that, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstained? Seeing none. Okay, motion carries with the denial of the interpretation. Thank you again, Mr. Van Dam. You did a really good job. I'm sorry that it's gone this way, but it's often difficult for us to overturn a staff interpretation in this regard. Thank you. All right. With that, Logan, is there anything else on the agenda for us to discuss?
No, that's all.
Okay. All right. Wow. Hey, that's not bad. 9:26. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right. So moved. All right, everybody. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.